the 2026 State Superintendent of Public Instruction election primaries set for early June, and thrilled to be joined by one of the candidates for SPI, Speaker Anthony Rendon. Thanks so much for taking the time, Anthony. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm well, thank you.
Good. Let's jump right in. Why is now the time for you to make this run for SPI?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I think what we see at the federal government level with the demise of what I consider to really be an attack on public education warrants, I think, a different look, a different perspective at SPI. And I'm someone who was speaker the first time Donald Trump was president, and sued the federal government umpteen times, and were successful in many of those efforts. And I really think that, unfortunately, I believe that the superintendent of public instruction will probably be the leading education person in this country with the demise of the Federal Department of Education. And as somebody who went to public schools, K through 12, as somebody who worked in state-funded early childhood education programs, as someone who went to the Cal State, UC, and community colleges, I think I'm well suited for this gig.
Let me ask you about the big issues here in the state of California. What do you think are the big issues we're facing in public education here in the state?
I think there's a couple of things. I think obviously the big issue that we're facing is attacks from the federal government. If you think of like a purely federal program like Head Start, I ran federally funded Head Start programs. I ran state-funded childcare programs. When I was running state childcare programs alongside federal Head Start programs, we had cuts at the state level when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor. At the same time, Barack Obama kept funding constant at the federal level for Head Start. But what happened is a lot of those students from the state programs sort of bled into the federal programs, and you're going to see that happening in reverse now. You're going to see a lot of cuts to Head Start that are going to cause a tremendous strain on our early childhood education programs, which are funded, which are CDE programs. So I think that is a huge issue. The sort of inequity. I live in an interesting city. The city of Lakewood doesn't have its own school district. We have 4 different school districts depending on where you live. Where we live, my kindergarten daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, Vienna, we're an ABC Unified School District, fantastic school district, but not all the districts, not all the people who live in this city get the same high quality education. We've seen that as well with transitional kindergarten and the transition into transitional kindergarten. I've been looking at this throughout the state. Tremendous inequities in the way that the program has been implemented, and that's something that I see as someone who is an architect of those programs at the state level. We wanted to make sure that everybody had the same high quality transitional kindergarten programs, and that's not the case.
Governor Gavin Newsom certainly made some news earlier this month with his comments at the State of the State address and talking about the role of the SPI and shifting power away from the SPI. So that begs the question, Anthony, what role do you think the SPI should have moving forward in the state of California?
Well, the governor did propose some changes, and as a legislative guy, as a guy who was in the legislature for 12 years, I know that the governor makes proposals, and then the legislature vets them and changes them, and it's a back and forth negotiation. So we'll see what the legislature does. I do like the governor's idea of placing the SPI on the community college board. I think that's important. I think that helps to provide a lot of continuity with the whole sort of cradle to career education aspect of our educational system. I think that's important. Some of the other changes, hey, look, I'm, at a time when democracy is being threatened all over the world, I don't like anything that empowers executive branches, anything. Giving the governor more power over education, I get it. I understand the desire to streamline things. But now is certainly not the time for that. I've said it a billion times. All governments, all forms of governments have executive branches, but only democracies have legislative branches. Only democracies have independently elected folks, as we do with an SPI, as we do with the controller, as we do with the state treasurer. I think that's important. I think Hiram Johnson and the folks who sort of designed the modern California political system through the progressive movement, I think they knew what they were doing. I think it made sense. I understand the governor has frustrations with the education system. I do as well. But I think the SPI needs to be empowered.
You mentioned earlier about the federal government. We have seen a lot from our federal government over the last year, attempts to dismantle the Department of Education. How would you make sure that no matter what is happening, we're keeping students at the forefront?
Well, I think there's two things. I think there's something you do at a local level, and there's something you do to sort of fight back. I was talking to the Secretary of State Shirley Weber the other day. She has 45 attorneys on her staff. That's important. It's particularly important, I think, at a time when the Voting Rights Act will probably be threatened, if not eliminated, in this country. So I think there are proactive things that you can do that I think Secretary of Attorney General Bonta has been very effective at battling the federal government. And I think the way to do it and the way to do it effectively, and this is something that I did when I was speaker, is to not do it alone. Joining with other sympathetic legislatures, as I did when I was speaker, joining with other sympathetic SPIs in this case is important. At the same time, we need to make sure our schools are places where people are safe. I drop my daughter off every day at 9. I pick her up at 3, and I think a lot about the extent to which those kids and the families of those kids worry about things that are happening in our community, whether it's school shootings, whether it's ICE. Our schools need to be sacred places. Our schools need to be places where people learn. We learned during COVID and the attendant mental health crisis that developed from COVID that kids do not learn the same way when they're threatened or when they're scared, and we need to make sure that schools are safe places.
We've seen record per pupil spending in the state of California, and yet that hasn't exactly translated to higher test scores in math and reading, as California kind of finds itself in the middle of the pack nationally. So I ask you, Anthony, how would you work with districts to make sure that that high level of funding translates to better test scores for kids?
Yeah, it's a good question and a fair question. When we started out my class, the class of 2012, I think our per pupil funding was around 47 in the country, 47 out of 50. We're in the top 10 now. So you're right. We have increased per pupil funding. Our test scores have not increased. I think a lot of that is because of COVID, and a lot of it is relating to the issues around equity that I talked about before. Some districts are increasing. No surprise. It seems as though school districts where there's greater income and sort of ancillary services that people are able to provide. The school district and the school that my daughter goes to, we have an education foundation. I'm able to volunteer every Tuesday. I'm able to give money. A lot of parents aren't able to do so, and we know that in those school districts where kids aren't allowed to, where kids don't have those sort of ancillary benefits and their families aren't in a position to be as involved, we know that the test scores just aren't as good. We've seen a tremendous improvement around what we call community schools. And I think ultimately that's where we need to go as a state. I think a greater investment in community schooling, making sure that nonprofits are involved in the school districts important. We keep asking our schools and our school districts to do more and more. And I think the best way to do that is to make sure that they have partnerships with nonprofits and governmental agencies.
This is one of the deepest fields that we have had for the SPI race in some time. A lot of qualified candidates. What sets you apart from the rest of the candidates out there?
Thanks for the question. And you're right. It's a deep field, lots of good friends. I served with Elmer Succi for 10 years. I served with Josh Newman for a long time. I've become friends with Nichelle and Richard on this campaign trail, getting to know them. Some really qualified folks. I think the difference between me and them is I sat across desk from 2 governors, negotiated 7 budgets with 2 governors. I sat across the desk from 2 pro tems, negotiated 7 budgets with them. A lot of well-qualified people, a lot of really good people. But when big deals have gone down around policy, when big deals have gone down around the budget, I'm the only one in this field who was in the room when those things happened.
Speaker Anthony Rendon, appreciate the time, spending a few minutes with Naj and myself. Best of luck in the primary in June. Best of luck in the weeks and months ahead. And thanks so much.
Cheers, guys. Thanks.